You will see this only with us. The enemy has breached the border. The offensive on Kharkiv region has begun. Hellish strikes on Sumy. Russia is killing children. Commotion in the capital of the Russian Federation. Ukrainian drones strike again in the Moscow region. North Koreans and Chinese definitely did not expect this. Colombians are fighting for Ukraine. Watch fiery, hot and blazing footage from the front line right now. The fourth year of the full-scale war. The war that Vladimir Putin and his entourage unleashed on Ukrainian soil. The heroic resistance of the Ukrainian armed forces and the entire Ukrainian people in the fight for the freedom continues. Greetings, this is Front News. With you is Vladimir Timoshenko. In the next 30 minutes, you will find the truth about the war, which our journalists are uncovering from the hottest combat zones. Well, are you ready? Then we begin. And we start right away with the most terrifying. On Palm Sunday, Russian terrorists struck the center of the city of Sumy with 2 ballistic missiles. 35 dead, including 2 children. On this day, many believers were going to church. Some were returning from the service at that moment, possibly even on the same trolley bus that the Russian Iskanders incinerated completely. Ukraine once again mourns the victims, while our intelligence has discovered that the mass murder of civilians is on the hands of the 112th and 458th Missile Brigades of the Russian Federation. And it was precisely the unit of that same 112th Brigade beat that struck the village of Groza in the Kharkiv region a year and a half ago. At that time, 59 people were killed. TSN journalist Oksana Solodovnik visited the site of the bloody events in Sumy. Her chilling report follows.
Smoke, glass, debris, a large number of burned-out cars. This is the center of Sumy. Right in the middle of the street lie the bodies of the dead, and there are many of them. It's horrifying. The street is practically drenched in the blood of the victims of the Russian attack. At the scene of the tragedy, the identification of the deceased by their relatives continues. The first missile strike by the occupiers was at 10:20 in the morning, and the treacherous second strike, which has become a trademark style of the Russians, followed 3 minutes later. One missile hit the roof of the State University's Congress Center. This is a venue for many educational events, a large library. On weekdays, numerous children's clubs operated here. Another missile intended to kill everyone who came to rescue the wounded hit the academic building. The explosion destroyed classrooms on 2 floors, blew out windows in adjacent courtrooms, historical buildings, and nearby apartments of Sumy residents.
I saw people running out onto the street with bloodied faces. Horrible. Everything is burning. Everything is ablaze. It's like a smokescreen. Many people were lying on the asphalt. Well, it's terrifying.
The owner of this car, amazingly and incredibly, miraculously remained unharmed. She managed to hide between the explosions. Is this your car?
My daughter's.
And how is your daughter?
She survived. She managed to get into the bomb shelter.
But the trolley bus didn't make it. Its route passes literally a few meters from the school building. Several civilian cars and this trolley bus were at the epicenter of the explosion. Unfortunately, most of the people who were in it died, as the vehicle was pierced through by debris. Rescuers and police officers who extricated the body of the deceased trolley bus driver and another woman say that they had no chance of survival, as the Russian missile was specifically designed to destroy the unprotected people.
Examinations are being conducted to check what kind of munitions were used. But it is already visibly apparent on the walls that these were shrapnel elements, and most likely it was a ballistic missile with cluster munitions, intended to destroy personnel. People were returning from church. Today is a major holiday, and the enemy delivered such a criminal strike.
The number of casualties was increasing by the minute, eyewitnesses report. People were dying from blood loss in the arms of passers-by, who were providing assistance. The wounded were being rescued by medics, police officers, rescuers, and Red Cross representatives. In the first hour after the terrorist attack, there were already more than 20 fatalities. By the evening, the number of victims had risen to 34, including two children. 117 wounded people sought medical help, including 15 children.
We saw that cars, and people were burning here. Some were groaning, some were not. We then started to examine them, walked through the trolley bus, checked whether they were alive or not. Unfortunately, all the people there had died, and we evacuated everyone to a safe place, the basement of the banking academy. And accordingly, help was provided there. Unfortunately, one woman died.
A headquarters for assisting the victims has been set up near the site of the tragedy. 20 buildings were damaged by the explosions, including 4 educational institutions, 10 cars, a trolley bus, a cafe, shops, and 5 apartment buildings. Rescuers are still clearing the debris. Almost 90 victims sought medical assistance, including 10 children, and unfortunately, these numbers are clearly not final. Law enforcement is now investigating the circumstances of Russia's cynical war crime.
In general, both President Zelensky and Commander-in-Chief Syrsky have spoken about the Kremlin's aggressive plans regarding Sumy and Kharkiv regions. Since the end of February 2025, Russian troops advancing in the Kursk region managed to cross the state border and engage in battles already in the Sumy region. It was there that TCR military correspondent Andriy Tsaplienko visited. So, Juan, will Putin storm Sumy and the nearby settlements? This is exactly what the next report is about.
From these positions, you can see the border that the Russian horde is trying to break through. Behind us is Sumy, where the Russian army recently killed dozens of people.
No. And at the end, someone changed.
But Ukrainians have something to fight back with. The Ukrainian command acknowledges that the Russians will try to launch an offensive both in the Kharkiv region and here, in the Sumy region. They are trying to break through the Ukrainian defense, and the artillerymen of the 47th Brigade are feeling this intensely. Now, in just one day, a Paladin gun can fire up to 100 shells at enemy positions. The Russian-Ukrainian border in the Sumy region has turned into one of the most intense sections of the front, say the fighters of the 47th. And since the counter-offensive at Robotyne, they have seen almost the entire line of combat contact.
Perhaps the hardest part right now is here, in the Sumy direction. Our enemies are acting much more actively. There we were advancing, but here we are defending.
This did not come as a surprise. The Russian group created to push Ukrainian troops out of the Kursk region is predictably trying to cross the border in the Sumy region. The enemy's assault groups are fighting for the Ukrainian villages of Zhuravka and Veselovka. They are losing a crazy number of soldiers to secure positions in Novenke and Basovka, which have already become a gray zone. The direction of their movement is obvious. The village of Yunakovka is a logistic stronghold of the Ukrainian defense. This is the north of the Sumy region. Scorched earth tactics. The Russians are destroying civilian homes to force the peaceful population to leave this area. According to Western analysts, the Kremlin's plan is first to create a Russian buffer zone in the north of the Sumy region, then to try to encircle Sumy from both sides. Neither the first nor the second will succeed for the occupiers, promises one of the commanding officers of the 47th Brigade.
We can already see that they have absolutely no results. In fact, we have made some advances in certain areas. I am local myself, fighting in my homeland, in my small historical homeland. I think they have zero chances here. Well, zero.
Currently, American M109 Paladin howitzers are targeting the enemy's assault groups. But if the Russians suddenly reveal their artillery, everything flies at them. Shells, missiles and drones.
Look, it's off.
Is our FPV flying? Ours.
We will do everything to be able to defend as effectively as possible and give them a worthy response. We are engaging the target.
But are these assaults? From their side, I mean.
From their side as well. We are also engaging. We are preparing a bridgehead for an offensive, so to speak.
Ukrainian troops are still present in the territory of Kursk. Some units of the armed forces broke through into the Belgorod region to split the Russian grouping. Therefore, the enemy will no longer be able to advance with a unified front in the Sumy and Kharkiv directions.
But, you know, it was very loud recently in the Moscow region. So loud that Vnukovo airport temporarily ceased operations. The Russians themselves write in various forums that drones resembling helicopters attacked the Moscow region. Well, as they say, fear has big eyes. And by the way, It immediately brings to mind the statement by Alexander Syrsky that the Ukrainian armed forces destroyed a Russian Tu-22 M3 bomber using a Ukrainian drone. All the details? Let's watch. Go ahead! Whoa, 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 whoa! There's something! Whoa, 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 whoa! Drones came to wish an unrestful night to the residents of the Kaluga and Moscow regions. Around 9 in the evening, 6 UAVs were allegedly shot down over the Kaluga region. Explosions were heard in Naro-Fominsk, Moscow region. Vnukovo Airport temporarily did not accept or dispatch planes. Restrictions were also imposed on the operation of the airport in Kaluga.
Meanwhile, there is no one to defend Russia because everyone is involved in the so-called special military operation. Russians are beginning to advance on the Sumy and Kharkiv regions. The fact that the offensive has already begun was stated by the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, Alexander Syrsky, in an interview with journalists.
There are attempts at an offensive now, in the Sumy direction, in the Kharkiv direction. But considering that we have established a second and third line of defense and have fortified well, adopting an active defense, and finally, managed to create proper engineering, structures, today, the enemy lacks the forces and means to launch any serious significant offensive.
The Ukrainian commander-in-chief also stated that Ukraine was responsible for the accident involving the strategic bomber Tu-22 M3. Moreover, this was achieved like most strikes with a drone. In Russia, it was said that a technical malfunction allegedly led to the destruction of the bomber.
The Ministry of Defense cited a technical malfunction as the cause of the accident.
At the same time, Syrsky notes that the front in Ukraine is constantly expanding, and Russia's mobilization resource amounts to 20 million people, most 5 million of whom have military experience.
Due to the constant doubts among our partners, ongoing disruptions in the supply of ammunition and weapons, their ambiguous political statements, and various considerations and deliberations, we have prolonged this war for more than 3.5, almost 4 years. Although we could have ended it long ago if the European Union had given at least 2% of its weapons to Ukraine, we would have already put an end to it.
The occupiers are replenishing their army not only with Russians but also traditionally with North Koreans. If previously the latter used old Soviet tactics and suffered significant losses, now they have better training and equipment. Even with this, the likelihood that the North Koreans won't be cannon fodder is very low.
Only incompetent commanders who simply want to preserve the lives of some Russian soldiers recruit these North Koreans. A very big problem is the language barrier. Accordingly, it is very difficult to establish interaction with North Korean units.
Hour by hour, dealing with Russia doesn't get easier, as the Kremlin regime is very prone to fabrications. Not always successful, but they can certainly rattle nerves. This is exactly what they plan to do in the fall in Belarus, specifically by conducting the Zapad 2025 exercises.
In my opinion, this situation might not develop favorably for the European Union. Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia. That's 60,000 if he mobilizes and gathers them for exercises. As it was, they gathered 150,000 for exercises around Ukraine. For 2 months, they then set up logistics, cleared all border hospitals, sub-hospitals, organized their logistics, and within 2 months, they advanced into...
Well, now it's time to analyze the operational situation on the Lyman front. The enemy continues its military terror here as well. On the Lyman front, the invading army carried out 13 attacks on Ukrainian positions near the settlements of Nadezhda, Novaya, Yekaterinovka, Grekovka, Zelenaya Dolina, Torske, Belogorovka, and Grigorievka throughout the day. One of them is still ongoing. Now let's talk about foreign volunteers who are fighting on Ukraine's side against Russian terrorists. Let's focus on the citizens of Colombia, a seemingly distant country, 11,000 kilometers from Ukraine, mind you. But in reality, there is something that unites Ukrainians and Colombians. Local soldiers in their homeland, in South America, fought against the communist guerrillas of the FARC group, which Moscow supported for decades. This is the signature Kremlin style. The motivation of Colombian soldiers in the war against the Russian army is the subject of the next report by TSN correspondent Andriy Saplienko.
In the Kharkiv region, the shortage of infantry is compensated by foreign volunteers. One of the most organized and numerous groups of foreigners in the Ukrainian army are citizens of Colombia. Typically, Colombians signing a contract in Ukraine have combat experience. In their homeland, they fought against the communist guerrillas of the FARC group, which Moscow supported for decades. Therefore, it's not just money that motivates Colombians to wear the Ukrainian uniform.
I am a participant in combat actions against FARC. We participated in the operation to eliminate the FARC commander. We have an ongoing internal conflict that is funded by Russia.
Is there evidence that Russia funded FARC?
Yes. Military intelligence reports have proven that Russia sends weapons, sends and trains militants. Russia has always waged a dirty war and taught the military to plant anti-personnel mines. The Russians violate international humanitarian law.
In the Katia Brigade, which holds the Kharkiv direction, Colombians are considered effective infantry. Therefore, the first national Colombian unit in the defense forces was created here.
This is not just a group of people who were accepted into the unit and went on to perform tasks. These are also commanders, Ukrainian commanders, who are proficient in the relevant language. It's a very large team that works around this 24/7.
The unit already has its own traditions, its own distinctions, and its own name, Guajiro.
They chose the name themselves, which sounds like Guajiro. This is in honor of the first soldier from their unit who was killed.
The official flag of the unit bears the motto, loyalty, dignity, and sacrifice.
This was very valuable to them.
The chief sergeant of the Guajiro unit believes that his fighters are much better infantrymen than the Russians. But to survive on the battlefield, that's not enough.
The Russian infantry is completely incompetent. We also see that they are inexperienced. Their strength lies only in drones and artillery. But the truth is that with every task we undertake, we are always learning. We already know how to counter drones and can operate in conditions of technological warfare.
However, it must be acknowledged that Russia recruits foreigners into the occupation army in significantly larger numbers than Ukraine can afford. Moreover, regular troops of Putin's ally Kim Jong-un are fighting on Russia's side, and Putin's army is conducting assault operations across almost the entire front.
And now we move to the Kramatorsk and Toretsk directions of the front. The enemy is becoming more ferocious here as well. In the Kramatorsk direction, the occupiers twice attempted to advance on Ukrainian positions near Chasiv Yar and Andriivka. One battle is still ongoing. In the Toretsk direction, 4 battles have concluded. However, 2 enemy assault operations are still continuing. The enemy is trying to advance near Ozaryanivka and Toretsk. There is no stable front line, and battles are taking place in almost every building. The city of Toretsk has been at the center of hellish battles for 9 months and is still partially under the control of the Ukrainian army. Throughout the entire defense, our forces have eliminated about 20,000 Russians there. The difficulty, the warriors say, is that the front line can even run through a single high-rise building. This is when one entrance is controlled by the enemy and the other is already held by our defenders. TSN special correspondent Yulia Kirienko visited the warriors of the 100th Brigade, who are defending the city. Exclusive material is coming up for your attention.
Toretsk is a small town surrounded by slag heaps, devastated and scorched by war. 9 months of fighting for the city, that's how long Bakhmut once held out. Toretsk still stands to this day. In its residential areas during this time, the warriors of the Volyn 100th Brigade, along with adjacent units, have eliminated about 20,000 Russians. And now the fighters are repelling another assault by the occupiers. The Ukrainian-made Bodana cannon is in operation. In Toretsk, there is an intense assault, so today there's plenty of work for the Bodana. The 3rd shot is already being prepared for such a long-range weapon. Therefore, our troops are doing everything possible to prevent the Russians from securing the positions they are trying to reclaim. The cannon fires a shell and the artillerymen lift another one. They do it together. The work is physically demanding.
Not heavier than a sack of flour. 40 kilograms more or less.
The commander transmits the coordinates over the radio. These are the residential areas of Toretsk, or rather, what remains of them. Between those ruins, Russian infantry is moving. The fighters are defending ours. They are shooting again. The Bodana gun is securely entrenched in the ground. Its use is unusual, say the artillerymen. This is wheeled equipment, and previously the fighters would simply drive it to the firing point from the rear. Now they are forced to park it in a caponiero and settle themselves near it in the ground, because the road to the front line is too dangerous.
They especially started hunting us, especially when 3 of their D-20s were destroyed.
But that's not all that the gunners destroyed with their Bodana. This particular gun helped to liberate Snake Island, and artilleryman Yuri, who was involved, says it was the first time he fired from the sea at enemies.
I'm sailing on a barge.
We sailed on a barge, loaded up. On the first day we arrived, I think we launched a few. We arrived, they pulled us onto this barge, and already I think 48 were launched. Directly at the island. Well, we hit something there. I think a Pantsir. And something else was destroyed. I don't remember very well anymore. This is one video that I have.
Occupiers who are committing atrocities on Snake Island.
In these shots, the firing of the Bodana and Yuri's work towards Snake Island are captured. The warriors still can't believe that the operation turned out to be so important that it went down in history.
We had 2 ships covering us, and there were more on the sides. We went in and moved forward. Well, guys, we made it in.
Later, Yuri had a mission in the Belgorod region, and now he is covering our infantry near Toretsk. And every shot from the Bodna saves the lives of his comrades.
And now we move to the blazing Pokrovsky front line. Let's be honest, Vasesits, this is another sacred target for Putin and his pack. Accordingly, the situation here is extremely tense. In the Pokrovsky direction, Russian invaders made 19 attempts to push our defenders from their positions in the areas of the settlements of Sukaya Balka, Yelizavetovka, Lisovka, Kotlino, Udakhne, Kotlyarivka, Bodanivka, and Andriivka. The defense forces are holding the line and have already repelled 16 enemy attacks. 3 clashes are still ongoing. Yes, the Russians are advancing in the Donbas. The main goal of the enemy here is clear: to capture the urban agglomeration of Kramatorsk, or at least part of it, the city of Kostiantynivka. But you know, even this task seems unrealistic. In order to encircle Konstaka, as the city's defenders call it, the enemy first needs to occupy Chasiv Yar and Toretsk. But in both settlements, the Russians have been stuck for several months, and it's all thanks to the Ukrainian heroes. Details in the exclusive report from the front line by TSN military correspondent Andriy Tsaplienko.
The 2S7 legendary. Pion is the largest caliber of Ukrainian barrel artillery. Shells weighing about 100 kilograms almost became a problem for the Ukrainian army, but Ukraine managed to solve the issue of their shortage. However, Russia did not. Apparently that's why Putin is asking Kim Jong-un for his large-caliber Koksan installations. The Pions have become one of the advantages of the Ukrainian forces.
This is the largest caliber, and it is very important. Because Ukraine does not have such a huge number of missiles, a large number of targets have to be hit with large caliber shells.
When the massive, powerful giant gun fires, you can feel the ground vibrating under your feet.
You aim, notify everyone that there will be a shot, and then you fire.
At the beginning of the war, these peonies of the 43rd Brigade stopped the advance of enemy columns on the capital. 3 years later, the old 8-inch gun remains relevant. It dismantles well-protected Russian fortifications, essentially performing the function of cabs, which the Ukrainian army critically lacks. How many shells can you load in a day?
A lot? Let them bring more. We will work, so to speak, until we drop. 50, 40. Probably the most was somewhere up to 100. 50, 40. The most probably was somewhere up to 100.
Wow. But they won't let you fall. There is always a medic at the peony position.
I always go out with the guys to the firing line. God forbid something hits, I provide first pre-medical aid.
Despite all efforts and tremendous losses, unfortunately, Russia cannot achieve significant advancement on the front. As a result, Russian terrorists strike peaceful cities, while the world harbors illusions about appeasing the Kremlin killer.
Well, now it's time to analyze the situation on the Huliaipol and Orikhiv directions of the front. Russian world continues to destroy, kill, and maim here as well. In the Huliaipol direction, the enemy carried out airstrikes with unguided rockets on Huliaipol and Jelezno-Dorozhne. In the Orikhiv direction, our defenders repelled 3 enemy assaults by Purta in the areas of the settlements of Stepne and Lobkove and Orkaye Malipo, Sherbaki. 1 person was killed, and 6 others were injured as a result of the Russian attack on the Zhitomir district. The fact is that an enemy drone hit an ordinary apartment building. 5 more people were injured, among them a child born in 2011. The child has been hospitalized. According to preliminary data, at least 5 neighboring houses were damaged. All the details in the next report by TSN correspondent Valentina Dobrota.
The Russian drone clipped trees on its path and fell between apartment buildings. The blast wave blew out windows and doors, and a store on the ground floor caught fire. At that moment, 74-year-old Halina was passing by the store. After suffering a stroke, the woman has poor hearing and didn't even know about the air raid alert.
I didn't understand what happened at all when it exploded. I fell and there was a fire in that store. The windows blew out and it fell on me. I was bleeding from my head and legs.
Halina was admitted to the hospital in serious condition, impaired consciousness, open cranial injury, concussion, and debris all over her body. A Russian drone arrived at these houses by evening.
It kept spinning and then suddenly started descending. And explosions. Everything is falling. Everyone is screaming.
People were just coming home. Well, I'll give you a ride now. Yuri was just entering his apartment. There were glass shards in the walls, plaster crumbled, interior doors flew out, and 2 walls were completely burned out. His daughter and wife wouldn't have had any chance if they hadn't run to the shelter when the alarm was announced.
We respond to alarms, we go out, and I had just come from work, called them, and told them to go to the shelter. We weren't at home here, we were in the neighboring one.
When the apartment was already on fire, the man rushed through the smoke to save the cat and documents.
I ran in, grabbed him, and he survived.
In the apartment, opposite Yuri's lived a large and less mobile family.
I'm at work in Kharkiv. My daughter with her bedridden mother and bedridden child were here for 1.5 years. Yes, we pulled them out.
Lezia's entire family found refuge with relatives, and the woman came home to clean up the broken glass in the apartment. They
miraculously survived. I don't know how it happened. Some kind of miracle. It's all so close. I don't cry anymore.
Lezia's bedridden mother, as well as the wounded in the damaged apartments, were the first to be rescued by local residents even before the emergency services arrived.
Many people helped. Many ran around asking if there were any injured. They carried out elderly people. One grandmother was brought here to the bench. She was very badly injured. A girl ran out, the one born in 2011.
The girl was all cut up by debris and also had a penetrating injury to her right eye. After being examined by Zhitomir doctors, the child was urgently transported to Kyiv.
Besides the eye, her face was affected. She had many shrapnel wounds on her face, neck, and hands. Plus, there were metal fragments which we also removed in the operating room. Both metal and glass.
At night, 3 teams of surgeons tried to save the girl's vision. Her condition is now satisfactory, but she will no longer be able to see with her right eye.
The extent of the injury is significant. The extent of the injuries is significant. There is a significant loss of the eyeball's contents, and structures which, unfortunately, are very difficult to restore. This morning, the girl could see light. Only light.
In addition to the people, more than 100 apartments and several high-rise buildings were damaged. A special commission has already been created to determine the extent of the damage for compensation.
The Shabbat is not closed. And to wash.
The consequences of the destruction were dealt with by midnight. Rescuers also set up heating points. Their psychological assistance was provided, and in the morning, utility workers and apartment owners began boarding up windows.
That's all for today. But very soon on the Front News program, there will be new, unique materials from our journalists in the hottest spots of the war, obtained so that you know the truth. This was Vladimir Timoshenko with you. Take care of yourself and your loved ones.